This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast from the Action Network and Fantasy Labs. I'm your host, Chris Raybon, and today we are going to get into some best ball strategy for this season. If you haven't already checked out our Expert's Guide to Fantasy, be sure you do. Sean Koerner, you're on that one. Very jam-packed episode, and we still couldn't talk about best ball really at all because it is so different in terms of the strategy. So how you feeling about this one? You ready to get into another marathon recording session that's probably longer than our guy DP wants it to be?
Yeah, absolutely. But like you said, completely different strategy compared to traditional, head-to-head formats. But yeah, looking forward to hopping in with this.
Yeah, and we're going to go, first half of the episode is going to be all of our strategies and tips, and then we're going to get into some players we like in the second half, so should be a good episode. But before we jump in, we have a very cool announcement. The Fantasy Labs app is now here, so if you are getting ready to go out there and try to dominate your fantasy football league this year, why not use the same projections that Sean and I use? Well, guess what? You can. Our Fantasy Labs NFL subscription gives you access to our player rankings, player projections, customizable draft cheat sheets, and more. New subscribers, all you got to do, use the code FLEX20, that's Flex20, and you get 20 cash off at fantasylabs.com/flex. Now, let's go get this money, win your league, use code FLEX20, $20 off a Fantasy Labs subscription. Sean, best ball, man, it's a whole different beast. Now, some of the same things apply. You're still, I think, rewarded for taking risks, later in the draft versus earlier, but I think you're rewarded for taking more risks in general. So what are your top tips? How are you approaching best ball that's different from traditional fantasy leagues?
Yeah, so just when it comes to best ball versus traditional head-to-head season-long leagues, how you win is slightly different. So in traditional head-to-head season-long leagues, you're facing one team each week, where you simply need to score more points than them in order to win that week. So obviously you still want big games. You want players that have career years. You want guys with upside. You're drafting for, upside, talent, ceiling, and all that. But you still want a little bit more consistency and higher floor when it comes to season long, because you are just facing one player, one person a week. However, in best ball, you're competing against everyone in the league. So it's obviously a top heavy payout. So you're trying to finish top 3, top 2, top 1. You're trying to win it all. So the difference is every point counts every single week. So if Juwan Jennings, has that massive 3 touchdown game and you win your head-to-head league by 30 points, at a certain point, those extra fantasy points didn't matter. Whereas in best ball, every single one of those points matter. So these insanely spiked weeks are critical for best ball. That's why I created the best ball points added metric, where I'm actually taking how many extra points a player is providing each week. So it actually, those spiked weeks are more valuable in best ball. So what I found is, players with a high best ball added score, they tend to have way more volatility. They have hot weeks, cold weeks, but they have a higher ceiling. And, just one example of that is someone like Alec Pierce last year. Over half the time last year, he finished outside the top 40. So unusable scores in season long, best ball, you name it. He had a bunch of weeks where, he was putting up goose eggs, but 29% of the time, or 27% of the time, he finished inside the top 12 because, he's catching these 80-yard touchdowns. He's a deep ball merchant, so he's getting these big explosive plays, but they're just not consistent week to week. So someone like that is going to be way more valuable in best ball because you don't have to figure out when he's going to have his good weeks versus not. So that's kind of the slight difference when it comes to best ball is you're really shooting for these spiked weeks. So consistency really isn't what you're striving for. But yeah, with best ball, it's all about upside week to week.
Yeah, and there are even layers to that too, because there's going to be different contests where you are kind of playing against your league, and then there's contests where you're playing against let's say a whole GPP, and you're trying to get to a playoff, and then then the weeks become individual at that point. So you really have to kind of take into consideration which type of best ball league you're playing. But to your point, Anthony Richardson, Alec Pierce's teammate, over the past 2 years has a rate of about 45, 27%, and he's missed a ton of games. So it just goes to show that there's just such a different. And then his missed games are going to come into play because it is cumulative. So there's just a lot of dynamics in best ball and ways to take advantage of it. But yeah, I agree. The main thing is you're looking for upside and ceiling, and another thing is correlation, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing stack wise? Because I think there is kind of a common philosophy on stacking, but again, it really varies in your league and what type of prize you're ultimately aiming for. Because I think stacks went awry for a lot of people that attempted them as well last year.
Yeah, so I think stacking is very important for best ball because it maximizes your team's ceiling, which is what your goal should be in best ball. Because the spiked weeks are going to be heavily correlated. If you have a quarterback and 2 or 3 of his pass catchers, if the quarterback has a good week, it's likely that his pass catchers had one too. And you could take this on a macro level as well. I know you've talked about this, but you're also just investing in offenses just being better than people expect. So, last year I was pretty high on Sam Darnold. So on teams where I had, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, I also took Sam Darnold later because in theory, he's going to maintain their value even though Kirk Cousins gone. So you're kind of investing in the offense as a whole, being better than the market. And sure enough, Sam Darnold had a great season, which, helped Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison's value as well. So there's just a ton of correlation just in terms of, what they provide on a weekly basis, but also just against the market itself. So yeah, you typically want to stack your quarterbacks with, a couple of the pass catchers on the same team. And you can get creative with it. I actually took an Eagles stack recently where I had Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, and Dallas Goedert. And then later on in the draft, I took Will Shipley as well, which is kind of a sneaky stack because if Saquon Barkley gets hurt and misses extended time, obviously Will Shipley's going to hit at ADP. But also, Jalen Hurts is going to have to throw more, so that's going to help AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert specifically as well. So there's all sorts of hidden correlation in that by having the running back as well that centers around, the key player in Saquon Barkley here potentially missing time. And you never bank on that, but that's kind of the idea with these stacks is you're just coming up with a scenario where, if everybody hits, it's going to really amplify your team ceiling. And again, that's the name of the game when it comes to best ball is you're trying to really maximize your team ceiling, and stacking is one, great way of doing that.
Yep. And it's so important. And yet I think a lot of people a lot of drafters end up tripping themselves up with it because the key you hit on is it has to raise the ceiling of your team. And I think the way a lot of people end up doing it is they are attempting these stacks where a lot of it is riding on getting multiple guys in the early part of the draft instead of, if you just end up letting them come together, it's one thing, but what you end up seeing is people not only, let's say, don't or not only are going for like a Hurts, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith stack where it essentially comes down to three guys being available in the first 5-6 rounds, but they would also then avoid Saquon Barkley in that stack, and even if they had the opportunity to draft him, which last year that it played out exactly like that with Hurts and Barkley were very rare stacked together, and
Yeah.
it was and you saw this kind of throughout the board with these running backs or these quarterbacks and just people avoiding the other because there was it's not like a big correlation there, but it's still an offense. There's still a positive correlation, and then there are some negative ones but they're contingent on things that wouldn't affect you draft wise because you would still rather have more value than not. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of teams where they ended up killing their Saquon Barkley teams or killing their Derrick Henry teams because they were making decisions based off of who to fade at running back or who they wanted in these stacks. So I do think there's a even bigger edge in stacking because a lot of drafters do it wrong or don't realize, for example, there's another scenario, like let's say it's 2023 instead of 2024, and you take Jamar Chase where he goes, and then you stack him with Burrow, but Burrow misses the last half of the season. You killed like a first round pick by just attaching him to a pick that was a lot later in the draft. Or a better example is like Stafford with Nakua this year. If Stafford could go down, Nakua could still hit, and with Jimmy. But a lot of people don't think of that, and there's just going to be way too many of these combinations, especially in these larger fields where it's just the same exact stats, kind of the way we see in DFS. So I think that there's like a big game theory element to stacking that goes very overlooked. So I think it's very important to be kind of deliberate with your stacks and not just feel like you have to make decisions based on what you were intending to do if it's still a valuable pick at a certain spot, especially with these like when running backs are being worked into these stacks, or the fact that most of these quarterbacks going early are rushing quarterbacks as it is. So there's a lot of ways to kind of get an edge there, but one of the big things I think is people tend to obsess over roster construction. Where are you in terms of how many quarterbacks, how many running backs, and how does it change based on the way your draft is unfolding?
Yeah, I think that's the important part is every draft is different. I have general guidelines where I'm typically going to draft 2 to 3 quarterbacks. And ideally, you want to draft 2 quarterbacks. You have 2 quarterbacks that don't have the same bye week. They're pretty safe. You don't think they're going to lose their job. And you stack them with, a few pass catchers. There are times where you do take a third quarterback. I know you like, Anthony Richardson's a good example. Some just dart throw with massive upside. You can go with him. If one of your first 2 quarterbacks that you take is kind of shaky, then you'll want to add a third quarterback. So most drafts, I'm taking 2 to 3 quarterbacks. Running backs, it can range from 5 to 8. Ideally, you only have to draft 5 running backs, and they all stay healthy, and your team can have massive upside that way. But more times than not, I'm going to get like 6 to 7 running backs. It really depends. But I think wide receiver, is the most important to really have depth. So I like to have, 7 to 8, maybe 9 wide receivers because there is a flex position. So, outside of the 3 receivers you have to start, they could also fill in your flex that week. And wide receivers week to week are going to be very volatile, even more so than running back at times. So I think just having as many wide receivers as possible certainly helps. And then tight ends, similar to the other onesie position, quarterback, 2 to 3 tight ends. And, whether you have 2 or 3 kind of depends on who your first 2 tight ends are, and if there's some guy later in the draft you want to tack on, maybe part of a stack. But that's kind of how I go into it. I have these like vague guidelines, but as the draft goes, I kind of know what that specific team needs later on to fill out the rest of the roster. But I think just being in those ballparks makes the most sense. And there's no real hard, fast rule to, you only have to take 2 quarterbacks or you should take 3. I think it really depends on how your specific draft goes.
That is exactly what I wanted to talk about, because there is so much ink spilled with the analysis of the prior year and what worked. And it's great data, but a lot of it is descriptive. It's not really predictive of the future. So now that we've had a number of years of best ball being a prominent offering, we've kind of learned that any strategy can work. And yep. I think the key is, for example, it's going to come down to the players first and foremost. Let me say that. But this year, I think, for example, going back to quarterback and tight end, to 2 versus 3, the thing to keep in mind is that quarterbacks generally outscore tight ends on the low end. So the worst, like the quarterback 3s usually are going to get more points by a lot than the tight end 3s, because they're starters. They're still every week starters, a lot of them. And the tight ends, you're kind of aiming for a dart throw. So the more, it really is going to depend on the more of your opponents that are taking which position. That, if no one's taking, if it's 2 and 2, it's a little different than if everyone's taking a third quarterback and you're not, and you're taking a third tight end in place of that third quarterback. That could be costing you, and at the same time giving you unique roster construction, more upside. But that's something you have to kind of keep in mind here. And I think the same thing with the way you're looking at the running back wide receiver breakdown. If you're going against the grain and you're going heavy running back early, you might just want to stop after 4 even and just load up on wide receiver. Whereas if you are drafting a bunch of wide receivers going 0 RB, then you might be losing out by drafting a wide receiver 7 even, because you got to assume that the picks you are making are hitting. So you don't want to just keep belaboring the point of wide receiver when you really need to be, kind of fixing up your weak spot at running back. So there's going to be a lot of volatile kind of roster strategies. Is that something? Are you finding that too? Is there anything else you want to add there, or should we keep?
No, that was a great summary. I think, it's just important to kind of what you hit on, where you kind of just have to assume best case scenario in these situations, because unlike season long leagues, there's no in-season management. Where when I go into a season long league, I'm under the assumption every running back gets hurt, every backup running back gets some spot starts. Best ball, it's a little bit different. I think you're right. You can have some builds where you're taking 4 running backs and you're saying, I'm going to get lucky. They're all 4 going to stay healthy and they're all going to hit. And you kind of put that aside, knowing that, it might not work out that way, but you can be aggressive in that way of thinking about it. And one other point when it comes to running back construction is, in season long formats, there are times where you want to take the backup running back a handcuff. In best ball, you absolutely do not want to do that, because that raises your team's floor, but it does lower your ceiling. If you have Christian McCaffrey, you don't really need to take Isaac Guerendo or whoever you think the backup running back is, because that's going to require McCaffrey to miss time for the other player to provide value. And you don't want that, because you want your team to have as much upside as possible. So you want Christian McCaffrey to stay healthy all season. So that's just another slight tweak when it comes to best ball, is you're really not drafting players backups. Because again, we're trying to maximize our ceiling. So that kind of goes with my point of, you're kind of just assuming everyone stays healthy, because you are trying to assume best case scenario for that specific roster construction.
Yeah, that is the key. It's, you want your guys to hit. And I think there's just so many, there are places for inefficiency though. Like there probably would be a scenario where you would want to take Guerrero and McCaffrey if you were saying that all your other picks hit and the draft and your fellow drafters drafted in such a way that you would like Guerrero is still the top running back on your board at the pick you're making. Like there's a lot of contingencies, but I could see a situation where if I nail my draft because people are making all these mistakes and there's all these other correlations that if I have the correlation of San Francisco running back every week and it's the right two guys, that could put me over the edge in theory. So, because sometimes people go too far the other direction. So I think that's really the fun of best ball is that there's just the tail outcomes and the range of outcomes that we're working in are just so exponential. And so there's a lot of ways to be creative, or sometimes you have to just be more more conservative than the average, just because to your point, there's the 4 running back situation. If you really broke it down in terms of percentages, it would come out very, very, very low, especially when you consider you also have to, there's other things that have to go right with your roster. So that's how it kind of goes. At the end of the day, I still find it's still going to come down to your stacks, and then it's going to come down to your, what players you took, like, and who you avoided. Like that's still what's going to happen. But there's a lot going into it that you have to account for. That sometimes that adds a lot of volatility in both directions and gives you a lot more room to operate within constraints either direction. So I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, don't handcuff running backs is generally what you want to do. Don't use the same bye weeks again is another one, but sometimes it can work. It just you can't write it off. You just have to I think the valuing of the ceiling at the spot you're at in the draft, it's the most important thing. And so if guys line up, I think you do it, but it shouldn't line up for you that much. If you have guys properly valued, it's a low probability. So, but there is some nuance there, and it's pretty interesting because I do think there's a lot of exploitable things. There's less generalizations we could make. Would you say that? Like, I think it's harder to put things in a box. You just have to be ready for each scenario and know how to handle it.
Yeah, exactly.
What are your thoughts on the approach to the playoffs in best ball versus the regular season in those kind of leagues or tournaments?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think that kind of goes with stacks. Is if you have a couple stacks, they're going to have high weekly upside, which will come into play in week 17. I think some people tend to look at, strength of schedule and the matchups that week, thinking everything's going to be the same from last year. I think, something like the Bengals defense will probably still be bad, but year to year defense isn't as sticky. So I think people will think that there's like these spots where, oh, it's a great matchup, but it turns out not to be. So you could actually be contrarian and go against that a little bit and, attack, a tougher matchup, assuming you're trying to be contrarian. Because these formats, you really need a high ceiling and to go against the grain a bit, do something a little different in order to actually come out on top. So I think the way, I know you've talked about it, but with everybody approaching it, AI now trying to get involved, they're going to have their own way of doing it. So just a slight tweak the other direction is probably the way to go. That's kind of how I approach massive GPPs as well. So I think when it comes to week 17, don't get too scared away by matchups, and just know that when you have stacks, that's kind of already solving that for, weekly upside is, if you have a stack that goes off, it's going to be in the same week. So I don't approach it the same way others do. And I think that's kind of what gives you an edge.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Is you want to be differentiated in some way. You just don't necessarily always have to be differentiated in such a crazy way because everyone else already is. Something as simple as getting the correlations and getting them cheap. And I think it's worked out that way in DFS a lot of the times too, where you just want to take advantage of the cheaper correlations with guys who are gonna be easier to stack together on your team versus putting yourself out there with having to create these stacks early in the draft, missing out on them, fading guys that are values because of it, people sniping you,
Right.
all these things. But everyone's doing that, so no one's really getting an edge versus the person that's taking the Titans, whoever they think the Titans number 2 receiver is, with Cam Ward and maybe a Ridley earlier, because it's just a lot easier to do. So you're gonna be able to take advantage of it and still have a team around it where you didn't give as much back. And I think that's always the thing, and that's why it comes down to GPP versus are you just playing against 11 other people. That's a huge consideration. But we're going to go into some players we like for 2025. Before we do, let's talk about this episode. It's presented by Yahoo Fantasy. And we know fantasy football is back. So fire up those group chats, get those draft boards ready, buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, overreactions, and more. It's all happening. And this year, Sean and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. So whether you're a first timer or you're a vet who's making your millionth appearance in the draft room, now is the time to get excited. When I see that purple and that exclamation point, I just feel like, man, it's back when I didn't even have enough friends to have a league. I just had to play with strangers, and that's how I got into fantasy. So it's a little nostalgic for me as well. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th, so stay tuned. Get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League today at yahoofantasy.com/flex. That's yahoofantasy.com/flex. All right, Sean, let's play a little game here before we get back into our best ball targets. What we're going to do is we're going to go with a would you rather, and I'm going to ask you, in 2025, would you rather take the consensus number 1 overall wide receiver in Jamar Chase, or the consensus number 1 overall running back, Bijan Robinson?
I'm going to go with Jamar Chase in this one. Give me the top receiver. I always like taking receivers in the first round, so that's the first reason why. But Jamar Chase, just coming off a monster season, he's still just 25 years old, so still entering his prime. Like, we might not have even seen the best season yet. He's attached to Joe Burrow. And, the Bengals defense was a disaster last year. They had to keep throwing it to stay in games. That should be the case again this year. And even Trey Hendrickson is dealing with some contract issues. If he's not even playing, my God, they're going to have to throw almost every down. So I just think Chase just has the perfect floor ceiling combo that I like to get when I do have the first pick.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. When it was Saquon Barkley, he wasn't likely to repeat. Now that it's Bijan Robinson, yes, he's been consistent, but I think that defense does give Chase some added upside, whereas Bijan Robinson, as a running back, you expect him to miss more games, and you never know with the Tyler Algier situation what could end up happening. A carry there, carry here, carry there. It could switch it all up. So I think we're both sold on Jamar Chase here. Let's just hope he doesn't pull a Christian McCaffrey or anything like that. All right. That was just a little game we played here. Would you rather? And it was sponsored by Yahoo Fantasy. And Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over the course of 28 days, giving you more ways to play, draft, and win. And it all begins August 4th. So stay tuned and get started at yahoofantasy.com/flex. YahooFantasy.com/flex. All right, Sean, let's talk about our best ball targets. It's getting to that time of year where we're going to start seeing some meaningful, maybe ADP movement soon. Like maybe guys will actually get hurt. Well, guys are getting hurt, and things are changing suspension wise or potential suspension wise, injury wise. But there's also going to be things that start to develop in camp. So let's start at quarterback. Who are you targeting as we are late now into July, starting to get into that first preseason game?
Yeah, so the first quarterback, I've been targeting is Caleb Williams, who had a disappointing rookie season. I loved him entering in the season last year, but he still finished 14th in best ball points added per game, despite being a bit of a disappointment. And he was sacked a league high 68 times, threw the ball away a league high 38 times. Saw his head coach and his offensive coordinator fired in season. So now look back at this current offseason, and I think the Bears have been doing a lot of great things for Caleb specifically. They brought in former Lions offensive coordinator and Ben Johnson, who I think will help Caleb out tremendously. Again, maybe having a scheme where he's going to be able to target his first read and avoid those sacks, avoid those throwaways. So I think Ben Johnson will help unlock that. They've also made a ton of additions on the offensive line. I think the line is going to be much better, which is also going to help Caleb. And despite losing Keenan Allen, they added 2 talented pass catchers in the draft with tight end Colson Loveland and wide receiver Luther Burden. So I think they're doing all the right things. And, Caleb Williams has it all right in front of him to have a year 2 breakout. And he still has, some rushing upside. Last year, there was broken plays where, he was trying to run for his life, things like that. But I think if things are a little bit more stable under, better coaching under Ben Johnson, we might see, that rushing upside combined with better passing numbers. So I think, his ADP is QB 12 right now. I have him as my QB 10, but I think the upside's there for him to just break out this year. Plus, when we're talking about best ball, he has a ton of stacking options where he could spread it around. So I love, taking him and pairing him up with DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Colson Loveland. So I just love these Bears stacks in best ball because I think their ADP is very fair, just given the upside that they all provide this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a time when Caleb he was sneaking up there into the top 8 at times, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna hold off, but he's kind of settled into a point where I do think, especially when you're talking about a stack, there's gonna be a lot of value there. And there is no everything is gonna come down to him at this point, I think, because the O-line is so good now. Yeah, it's new pieces, so maybe it takes some time, but ultimately, if you believe in his talent and he was a number 1 pick, then I think he's going to take a step forward this year. So should be a profitable stack. And there's another team that I think the ADPs are very fair, and that's the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'm taking a lot of T-Law. Just one of those guys who never going to be sexy, but you look at what Liam Cohn did and with Baker Mayfield and career highs, throwing the football, yardage, touchdowns, rushing the football as well. He was a lot better as a runner, and we know Lawrence can run. Now he ends up getting blown up a lot and missing time because of it, so we'll see if that carries over, but I just really thought Liam Cohn was extremely impressive in his stint with Tampa, his 1-year stint with Tampa Bay. Not much to go on, but again, when you're looking at a quarterback, in that range, Baker finished top 3 last year. He finished the QB3, excuse me. So, who saw that coming? Even in his prior year, a lot of us liked Canales and the job that he did, and Baker was still, and the Bucs were averaging nearly 10 points less per game. So it is really just, I think, a situation where you got Brian Thomas Jr., undervalued as well because he could be the number one overall receiver. I mean, you've compared him to Randy Moss in the past, and he has that kind of upside, at least statistically. And then Hunter, no one knows what's going to happen. So he's undervalued based on his talent. All the running backs, there's just so much uncertainty. It kind of reminds me of the stock market in a way. Just because there's uncertainty doesn't mean you have to avoid it. You actually might be better off investing in it because there's little downside and a lot of upside at those prices. And I think Lawrence is the guy who benefits the most, even if you don't know exactly how the playing time works out for Hunter or the backfield or, how good Strange is going to be or, all those other question marks. Lawrence is still generally the guy that's going to benefit.
Yeah, I've been with you on this. I love the Jaguars stacks. And I've like Brenton Strange, you just mentioned him. He's been, clear value in my eyes. But we might see some movement. I mean, we just saw the Seahawks release Noah Fant. So like he might pop up in Jacksonville. It's like crap. Like, that eats into, Strange's value maybe. So I've been kind of like backing off that. But is that who would be the top stack you think for like the Jaguars right now? Like Thomas Jr. and Strange or Hunter and Strange or both receivers? Like how are you handling this stack specifically?
I think the top stack for the Jaguars would be Thomas Jr. and Lawrence just themselves because again, I think people make way too many mistakes and if you're lucky enough to get Thomas Jr., you're getting it's easier to get Lawrence, and if you get Thomas Jr. and Hunter, like Lawrence is always going to be easy to get. So I think Thomas Jr. just being locked in, I think that's the best stack because he's the number one. But there is a situation where Thomas goes off and Hunter is still wildly undervalued. So it's definitely those top three. I don't think you need to get fancy, but I will say that I am perfectly fine with Dyami Brown or Strange in the stacks because I would much rather somebody do that than hear this and think that they have to reach for like a Hunter just because they had, Thomas, or it's just that's how you end up losing value when you're really reaching on these stacks. So I think my opinion would just be Lawrence and Thomas is the best one. Where would you go for that one?
Yeah. I'm obviously a Brian Thomas Jr. stan. I think keeping it simple, like you said, like early in the draft, if you got Brian Thomas Jr. or not. So if you get BTJ, maybe you try to get Hunter, but when it comes time for like, Trevor Lawrence to potentially go, you kind of have to reach to get him. That's kind of the other thing when it comes to stacks. You got to get ahead of ADP, and I'm willing to do that with Lawrence. So I think BTJ, Lawrence, and then like you said, if you can get Hunter or Dyami Brown way later or Brenton Strange, I think you do it. I think this is just an offense that everyone's undervalued. And you compare to the stock market, I'm saying crypto. Like you could like this could be a moon bag. Like the Jaguars could be the moon bag. So I just think there's a ton of upside there with them and the Bears offense. Like you're investing in the offense itself. So I think if you believe in Liam Cohen, you believe in like Trevor Lawrence finally taking that leap, you got to go all in and take a few of the pass catchers with him.
Yeah, and I was tempted to say my favorite quarterback is any quarterback in the entire QB2 range or into that QB3 range that I have one of his top pass catchers because that's generally the way I like to stack is with the cheaper quarterbacks and not risk reaching early in the draft when it has proven to be a lot more detrimental and there's people doing it anyway. But talk to me about another quarterback who is similar to Darnold. You're high on this year.
Yeah, JJ McCarthy, who, unfortunately had to miss his entire rookie season due to that torn meniscus. It was going to be interesting to see how that would unfold because last year, I think everybody assumed, Sam Darnold would start week 1 and then eventually McCarthy would take over. But, I mean, it's hard to tell when that would have happened because the Vikings started off 5-0. Darnold was playing well. They finished 14-3, so there's a chance McCarthy might not have even started last year, assuming, Darnold stay healthy. So the reason why I was high on Darnold last year was because McCarthy got hurt. Because, Kevin O'Connell, this scheme has made every quarterback in it look phenomenal. Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs. And then last year, Sam Darnold had a career year. This scheme is just very QB friendly. It has one of the best pass catching trios in Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. So it's going to be tough to fail in this situation. And, McCarthy, he was a first round talent last year. He flashed that in preseason. So I think with McCarthy, I'm trying to get ahead of it because, again, preseason starting in a couple weeks. We might see McCarthy out there making plays and, getting on other people's radar where his ADP might go up. So I've been trying to get him early on before that potentially happens because I think he does have, top 12 upside. He basically has, what we saw in Sam Darnold with potentially more because I think McCarthy has more rushing upside. So he's a guy, once again, it's very easy to stack if you get Justin Jefferson early on or TJ Hawkinson, might want to get JJ McCarthy to pair with him. Now, with Jordan Addison, there's that legal situation going on where that could get tricky with him, but you could, get your guy, Jalen Naylor, deep into drafts. He provides that touchdown upside and potentially upside if Addison were to miss time. So there's other ways to do that. But I think with, Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson specifically, they make great stacking options with JJ McCarthy because their value does depend on him being good in his rookie season as well. And that's kind of what I said is when you stack these guys, it's you're investing in the ceiling and the offense overall.
Yeah, and to your point about the correlation with Hawkinson in particular, they threw a lot more last year once he came back as well. They were up near 36 attempts per game with him and about 8 fewer than that without him. So there's a chance that that carries over. I know some people are scared of the Josh Oliver move, but he's an important part of the team regardless. Like he's just a great blocker and whatnot. So yeah, I think the key with the value at quarterback is that he's QB19 right now. Whoever is QB19 is probably going to be a guy. Because I like Jordan Love in that range as well, because I think that coming off a year where Green Bay just did not feel comfortable with his receiving room and thus ran the ball a ton and was able to do that because they still had a really good squad around him. But he was a top 5 quarterback in yards and attempts. He was top 5 in QBR. He was battling an injury from week 1. We know that Dobbs, Wicks, all those guys. At the end of the day, one of the worst kind of supporting receiving casts on the perimeter for a quarterback. So I think that this year is going to look a lot different with Golden. I think they're just going to be a lot more comfortable throwing the football, and he's always shown that he can be efficient. So, and then Stroud, another guy, but the guy I want to mention before we jump to running back is still Anthony Richardson, because he is top 10 in top 4 finishes over the past 2 years, despite missing all these games. And everyone kind of assumes that he's going to either share, the quarterback or job or lose it outright. And there's a scenario where he still plays 15 plus, even 17 games. He only really left games once last year, besides the fact that he was tired. So I think there's a lot of dips going on with Richardson, and yes, there's something to it, obviously, but it's priced in. He was going, where were you fading him last year? I remember specifically doing a pod where you were like, yo, he is the quarterback. What was it, like quarterback 6 at one point or something?
Yeah. I said he obviously has top 5 upside, but you're drafting him pretty close to his ceiling right now. So I was all high on him his rookie season, but last year he was on my fade list just because his ADP got out of control.
Absolutely. And coming into last year, he had missed a lot more games with less of a track record. The supporting cast was far less good, and the opinion of the backup was a lot higher because Joe Flacco was coming off that that magical 5-game stretch in Cleveland, if we want to call it that. So, yeah, I think, and then now this year he's just at a whole different part of the draft. I think he's free money. So love him. He's probably the quarterback I'm going to have the most of. Let's go to running back. Talk to me about James Conner, man, because it seems like every year we talk about James Conner in this kind of show, and we think he's gonna eventually it's gonna be the last year, and then it happens again. So why do you like James Conner this year?
Yeah, it's one of those things where maybe the wheels will fall off, but as of now, there's really no real concerns for me with him. He just continues to produce despite being past his prime. He's now 30 years old, so he is certainly in the decline phase of his career. But he finished 14th in best ball points added per game last year. His ADP is RB20, so this is sort of the frozen pond range where all these running backs, we could poke holes in. And I think he actually has less red flags than a lot of these other guys. With Conner, it's always, well, right now it's his age, but it's just, he's always hurt, always misses time, which it is true. He tends to miss 2-3 games a year, but that's really the median for running back. So he's just really consistent on hitting that median.
Him and Alvin Kamara, baby.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and then last year, he only missed one game, week 18. So that didn't even matter. So I think the injury risk for him is sort of overblown. It's kind of every running back has injury risk, if you want to put it that way. So, despite, him being 30, I still think he's stable and fairly safe in that RB20 range. So he's just a back I'm comfortable taking more times than not. But really that range, it's tough because a lot of these backs do carry quite a bit of risk. So he's just one that's stuck out for me that I'm still at least willing to keep going back to that James Conner at least until the wheels eventually do fall off.
Yeah, he still looks pretty good. I mean, not as good as he looked 2 years ago when it was just night. Like he was a monster, but he still looked like a top half running back in this league. And to your point, he's not been completely as unhealthy as we think. It's just that consistency kind of lulls you to sleep with the 3 missed games every year. But I'll go with the guy I just mentioned, Alvin Kamara. I've been getting him everywhere. No one wants to touch these Saints for good reason. But the thing I always try to tell people to keep in mind is there's probably going to be biases that you're not even aware of that you have just because of the stench of the past regime of Dennis Allen and Carr. Those guys, those are just stressful football people. I feel like just not the most fun to watch. And you always feel like you're screaming at the screen when you're watching those guys. But this is Kellen Moore coming in, who it's not just a team who's already bad on offense, and now it's some defensive guys coming in and they're going to tank, and he's not going to know what the hell's going on. I think Kellen Moore being at the head of this team, there is a chance for certain guys to hit value, and Kamara's at the top of that list because relative to last year, O-line should probably be better. Relative to last year, the offensive coaching staff is better. He's another guy who's never really had a ton of tread because he's always missed right around 3 games. And we saw what Kellen Moore's answer last year was to, we don't always feel confident in our quarterback dropping back. It was go extremely run heavy, and Saquon Barkley was just a league winner. So I'm not saying that Kamara necessarily has that type of upside because he's not going to have 11 70-yard runs, but the usage could be a lot more similar to Barkley if Barkley was just on, a losing team but was still playing a ton of snaps and being good. So I think that's easily smash value at his ADP because most running backs just don't have the receiving upside that Alvin Kamara does at this stage of his career. So I've really been on that those 2 old guys, those Conner and Kamara in this range. Not so much Mixon because I think that's the one where we're getting information that's telling us that maybe his role is going to change. So, but I know that I'm excited for this one because this is one where usually we're fairly in agreement on
Yeah.
certain things, but this is one where we're kind of going head to head already, and it's not even in August yet. So talk to me about this next guy, and then I'll make the case against him,
Yeah.
and listeners can decide for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So it's Dave Montgomery, and I already know what you're going to say, and I'm actually in agreement with you that his floor is lower this year. I know we both have taken advantage of him the past couple seasons, ever since he's been in Detroit. Where this year the offense itself, or he specifically, could take a step back. They did just lose Ben Johnson to the Bears, so we don't really know how this offense is going to be. We have a different play caller. It might not be as in sync. It certainly can't be as elite as it has been the past couple seasons. And he is backing up one of the best running backs in the league in Jahmyr Gibbs, who could have a bigger workload this year. And the offensive line takes a step back. But just when it comes to the profile of Montgomery, this is literally the type of running back I try to target year in and year out, and he still fits that mold. So last year, he finished inside the top 24 at the fourth highest rate. So that's really just showing he has a high floor. Obviously, that's touchdown dependent when it comes with him. But Jahmyr Gibbs was healthy all 17 games. So it was sort of worst case scenario in terms of his upside case, where if Gibbs misses any time, Montgomery is going to be a top 5, top 10 option, even at this stage in his career. So I'm just saying we didn't get to see that ceiling case from him last year. So all that having said that, I still profile him as that kind of high floor, high ceiling back. And he's still going, around the RB24 range. So I think it's a fair time to take that risk. And the other thing is, even if the offense takes a step back, maybe they get more trailing game scripts. That'll certainly help Jahmyr Gibbs. This defense was injury ravaged last year. They had the most adjusted games lost. My guy Aiden Hutchinson looked like he was going to be a potential defensive player of the year, and then he got hurt. So I think my hope is this defense stays healthy, is better this year, keeps them in games, and maybe helps Montgomery in terms of game scripts. So I think we kind of think the same thing. I think Montgomery's floor is certainly lower this year, all things considered, but he still does provide that solid, potential RB2 even when Gibbs is healthy, and potentially RB1 if Gibbs misses time, which we didn't even see last year. So he still fits that mold for me around that RB24 range.
Yeah, he's the only thing, because you made the case. I mean, sheesh, this is why you're who you are, man. You just made the case for both of us, so I don't even have to make the answer case. That was whew. So,
no, but you have been scaring me off him a little bit, so lay it on me.
I will just say that in terms of the missed games, Montgomery is the one that's older and has had the more recent injury issues. So I think he's still the more likely of the two to miss games. So it could go both ways. So that to me cancels out. Then you have the fact that because Gibbs got to play 17 games, he really showed that he could deserve even more work this year. Then you got the fact that it's the game scripts. Then you got the fact that it's a new coaching staff. Then you got the fact that Montgomery is usually at 1 yard per route or below until last year when he was above 2. So he could actually regress from last year, or he's very likely to in terms of his receptions, regardless of the situation. So I don't really see a receiving becoming a big factor. So there's just too narrow of a range of outcomes. I actually don't think he has as much upside because he's still the RB21 right now. And, he's in that RB2 range where even if Gibbs were to go down, I think this Detroit schedule and the team is different enough that there's a chance Montgomery's still not an RB1 type of back. Even if that were to happen, Montgomery could get, his 16, 17 carries, couple catches, not many touchdowns, maybe not many yards because the O-line was bad. And the big red flag for me was that he really dipped in terms of his yardage before contact efficiency, which is O-line dependent more so than yards after, but it still factors into the projection, and especially does because you project the O-line not to be as good, especially on the interior. So just a lot of things add up for him besides the age to where I don't see the same upside I'm getting where there was usually a scenario where you probably expected him to flat out lead the backfield in touches, and Gibbs would be more of a passing guy who was still going to get the carries. But now I think there's a big chance that Montgomery is Dion Lewis. Like he goes from that even workload to just the guy in front of him is so damn good that's a little rich for me at that spot, just because of the way the draft is kind of breaking out, where more people aren't taking the risk at running backs. I think, I guess there's more of a ceiling for taking Montgomery if other people aren't, but it's tough for me this year with people just like swearing off running backs for 4 rounds in the middle of the draft.
Yeah, that's fair. And also, real quick, it goes both ways. Like Jahmyr Gibbs has clear RB1 overall upside as well, because you can make the case for him where, like new offensive coordinator, he might be, screw this bullshit, 50-50 timeshare with David Montgomery. Let's just give Jahmyr Gibbs all the touches. And now he's RB1 overall. Or Montgomery misses a ton of time. And we saw that last year where Gibbs is clearly, elite RB1 overall type back. So I just think both Lions running backs have massive upside. It's just easier to plan on getting Montgomery because, he goes a bit later, whereas Gibbs, you need to have a certain draft slot to get him. But I think both Lions backs certainly have massive ceilings.
I mean, and we have to be, when we say ceilings, we mean overall ceilings versus ADP ceilings. Because I would actually argue the opposite. I think because they're both going in the top 24, and Gibbs is the RB, he goes top 5. There is significant downside risk to really both of them. I'm just a little more confident in Gibbs is beating, ADP, but he has less room to work with too. So it's one of those situations where, they as a squad, they have a lot of upside, but our fellow drafters have kind of killed a lot of it, as have we, by taking him that high. So
he's like the best way I put it in my RB upside piece is like, what other running backs in like the first couple rounds where like if the backup running back gets hurt, their value goes up. Like with like Saquon Barkley, if Will Shipley gets hurt, can his value go even higher? Probably not. Or Derrick Henry, like if Keaton Mitchell's out that week, does it really matter? No. But if David Montgomery's out, Jahmyr Gibbs, he has another gear that, he could get a handful more touches and more goal line, or a higher percentage of goal line work. He's like a rare breed where he's already going in the first round, and he has an even higher ceiling if his backup goes down, which is pretty unique that we even have a backfield like this. So that's kind of what I mean, where his ceiling's even higher than some of these other backs.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation. It's just a wide range of outcomes because the Lions could also score a lot fewer touchdowns overall as a team this year too. Like that's in the range of outcomes, just given what we've seen out of them closing the season, and then the schedule has gotten a lot harder this year. But again, you never know. But let's speaking of never knowing, talk to me about the 49ers backfield. What are you doing there? Because Christian McCaffrey is like, I want to draft him so bad, and then I also want to fade him so bad. So I'm glad I don't usually get the chance to draft
him. So I'm going to do the annual displeasure of trying to figure out the Niners backfield. But it's one of those backfields where we hate it because it's so unpredictable. Whatever I say ends up being wrong anyway. But it's important because whoever is the lead back is going to crush. And, starting the season, it should be Christian McCaffrey as long as he's healthy. But we need to figure out what happens if he misses time, because last year it was Jordan Mason was the back that took over. And this is important because Kyle Shanahan typically just wants to defer to another back. It's sort of next man up. He's just going to have the back be the lead back. So it's an important backfield to kind of target who you think the number 2 back is. And right now, I think it's Isaac Guerendo. So take it with a grain of salt because it could be Jordan James, who they drafted in the 5th round. It could be somebody that doesn't even exist yet. We don't know. but I'm gonna go with Isaac Guerrero. Every time I saw him play last year, like he looked like a great fit for Kyle Shanahan's scheme. They took him in the 4th round, but he missed quite a bit of training camp and preseason. I think it was like a hamstring injury or something.
Yep.
So when McCaffrey was out, he couldn't take over. That's why they had to turn to Jordan Mason. But once Guerrero was fully healthy last year and towards the end of the year, he did replace McCaffrey as the starting back, and he went off. He averaged the 8th most best ball points added per game over that stretch. And if you look at his profile, he's one of the most athletic backs we've ever seen. He had a perfect athletic score. He actually had the 2nd best athletic score the combine over the last 37 years. So this guy is talented. He's in one of the best schemes we have for running backs in the Niners. But just the one downside is we can never figure out who the next man up will be. But I think in this case, I'm pretty confident it'll be Guerrero. But this is one of those things I'll be paying close attention to the next couple weeks with Jordan James. Like I just mentioned, they drafted him in the 5th round. So I'm paying attention to training camp notes, preseason. But I've been taking some flyers on Guerrero where he's only going to offer value if McCaffrey misses time. But kind of what you're saying, he's missed 10 plus games a few seasons now. He always carries that injury risk. So later in his career, I think it's worth investing in the backup running back, even in best ball, because again, we're shooting for that massive upside, and there's a chance that Guerrero could end up starting 10 plus games. So he's one of those backs where I do it sparingly, but there are some times I take a flyer on Guerrero.
Yeah, I mean, because the things that are knocks on him are mostly not actually things you would weigh in a model. Like it's been a lot of shenanigans with Shanahan in the past, but that's just randomness. It's not anything specific to do with Guerrero himself. And so, yeah, I think that, and also there's probably just bias wise, he's being undervalued because remember that touchdown that he conceded by sliding or something? Didn't he slide down and then somebody else got the touchdown? Yeah, and they were all making fun of him. And meanwhile, Ricky Pearsall just went off on this poor Lions defense after being invisible. And so he's probably on the other end of that. So there's a lot to like about Guerrero. I mean, the fact that they got rid of Mason, they traded him, and then they also got rid of Elijah Mitchell. They let him walk, and Juszczyk was off the team for a second. But Abanikanda, he didn't get a snap even when everyone was hurt. It was all
I know, but as you say that, he's probably the dark horse to be the back that actually ends up. Tearing it up, right? Because we were high on him a couple years ago. He's disappeared, but he's now resurfaced as the 5th or 6th running back on the Niners depth chart. So even he is somebody we have to keep tabs on still.
Yeah, it's really, the more I look at it, I think it's a John Lynch thing too, because he's had some wild swings in terms of his effectiveness with moves. Like it almost seems like his draft stat times are inversely correlated, where you hit on the Brock Purdy as Mr. Irrelevant, but you also drafted Trey Lance. I mean, that's kind of hard to do. Hard to do. So
that's kind of how I draft my fantasy teams. Like the first team I drafted, Randy Moss was my last pick, and my first pick was Cordell Stewart, who I think got benched midseason or something like that. But sometimes it happens.
Yeah, man, I remember Cordell. He was one of the OG kind of running quarterbacks who you just knew he was going to do good in fantasy if he got the shot. But let's go to wide receiver. Let's start with this NFC. What is it? Is it the Central? No, it's the North. NFC North. You're right. NFC North. You just talked to me about Montgomery.
Yep.
Talk to me about JMO.
Yeah, so Jameson Williams is great for best ball. First of all, I mean, he finally broke out in year 3. That was actually, last year was his first full season. If you remember his rookie season, he missed a ton of time because he was coming back from an ACL tear he tore in college, like I want to say like January. So he didn't have much time to get ready for his rookie season. Then his second season, he was suspended. Then last year, finally got to play a full season and really broke out. He finished 18th in best ball points added per game. There was actually 2 games where he played the entire game and scored less than 1 fantasy point. But like I said, that doesn't really kill you in best ball. We're really just trying to take advantage of those spiked weeks. Those are what he provides as being just, explosive player in general, plus his downfield targets. So, the Lions offense could take a step back this year without Ben Johnson, but it could also mean, they have to throw more. Could mean Jamison Williams specifically sees more targets. So I think just he has a ton of upside, and he's only going wide receiver 25. I think that's an excellent range to take a player like Jamison Williams, where we know he's going to have his big weeks, but he could be even more consistent this year. And who knows, provide top 10 value. We don't know. But I think going wide receiver 25, that gives us plenty of cushion to have even more ceiling that we've seen yet. So he's a player specifically, I think, in best ball leagues, I'm looking to target when I can.
Fantasy Flex listeners, we've got a big announcement. We'll be having a live event on August 23rd presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Joe's on Weed Street in Chicago. I'll be there. Sean will be there. We'll have special guests as well. It's free to attend. You just need to RSVP. There's a link to RSVP in the episode description. Excited to see y'all there. Again, that's August 23rd at Joe's Bar on Weed Street in Chicago. Fantasy Flex live event presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Yeah, that just goes back to another reason why I don't like Montgomery as much, is because I think the Lions pass offense from a game script perspective, there's so many guys that are kind of being taken that there is a lot of downside to just people who are investing in the Lions, period, to fail. So but I think it's a lot more likely that Jamos and Amon-Ra, Laporta go off if, they're going to do what I think they're going to do this year than the other way around. So, yeah, it's I think Williams, especially with the black hole at wide receiver 3 potentially too, with Patrick, or is it going to be the rookie there? So who knows? But Williams in a good spot, really good spot. For me, I mean, I got to go with my Jaguars. So Travis Hunter, man, I think you just got to stop questioning it, because you look at the talent, you look at what they gave up for him, you look at the coach. If the coach was a defensive coach, then I think you would be a little more concerned. But this is a guy who had Tampa Bay coming off a step up, turn into a completely different offense, a historically good offense in many respects. And I think Hunter is going to be a polarizing guy. I think he is, because there's uncertainty. And what we've learned both, from these drafts and things just like we see in real life, like with the stock market, to go back to that, people don't like uncertainty even when they are supposed to. So I think the correct move is to embrace the uncertainty with Hunter. And it's most even conservative projections I have for him, he still tends to finish close to a top 20 wide receiver, or inside it easily, with the ceiling of a top 10 receiver. And that's with Brian Thomas Jr. there. And I just think that outcome is enough for me, because the floor, I just don't see as much of a floor with him being, drafted number 2, them giving up a ton, and you have a coach that might make this team like 50% like better as a realistic range of outcomes, because you saw him do it a year ago in a very similar situation. So, I mean, there's even a range of outcomes where Hunter is on par with Thomas. I mean, I'm a big Thomas fan, so I don't think it's likely, but it's not out of the question depending on how everything shakes out. So, I mean, I think he's a clear guy who we're just kind of overthinking it, or I would be a lot scared of McMillan going there, just assuming that he's going to be flat out, what we're drafting him as in a offense where there was like a undrafted guy that outplayed guys that were drafted in the first round, and a quarterback who's been horrible for most of his career. So yeah, give me some Hunter all day.
Yeah, I like it. And first of all, he's like Ohtani, where he's just not like average at wide receiver and cornerback. He won the top award for both positions in college last year. He's a freak. Apparently, he doesn't get tired, so I'm less concerned about him needing to rest, knowing that. But also, it's interesting because like I was watching Ohtani last night. He pitched 3 innings and he had a bomb. He plays the position he defends, so like think about it that way. He's playing receiver and cornerback. He's seeing both angles and both sides, so it actually helps him become better at both positions because he's he's playing offense on one side and playing the thing that's supposed to stop it on the other. So I think it just gives him a leg up, and I think he's going to be a great receiver and a good cornerback. But I've never really thought of it that way. Where when I was watching Ohtani pitch, he's thinking like a pitcher when he's hitting, and he's thinking like a hitter when he's pitching. He knows how to attack, the other side based on playing both positions. So I think we've just never seen this. So I think people, I agree, are kind of sleeping on Hunter's upside and maybe overlooking into the fact that he plays both positions too much, where it could just like be the greatest thing ever. So you definitely want to get on those things early. Like you were talking about Jaden Daniels last year at QB 16. Good luck, taking him outside the top 5 now. So yeah, when you have these unique players, you want to take them before they blow up. And that could be the case with Hunter, where he's being drafted right now. His ADP is like moving all over the place. I think it's like wide receiver 27 now. What's it at now? But it's been.
Let me double check that. But yeah, I've seen it between the 25 and 30 range, but trending more to the lower end of that. And I just think that I mean, if everyone was so bullish on him a couple months ago, what exactly changed? Like, what did you think was going to happen?
There was camp videos. Well, it was like mini camp. He was standing next to Brian Thomas Jr., which isn't a good side by side because Brian Thomas Jr. is a beast. And, people are just questioning it. It's kind of like, remember Jamar Chase? Remember his rookie season? He was having difficulty seeing the ball because he's used to the white stripe. Bullshit like that. I think that's going on with Hunter a bit. Same thing with Debo showing up looking a little overweight. I think it was just people kind of reacting to some clips they saw with Travis Hunter. So I do think people soured on him. But that's why I think his ADP took a bit of a hit, was just, social media nonsense.
It's not always not. I agree. It's nonsense like 99% of the time.
Nonsense.
But I've been on record as saying the Debo is my one exception where I've been so anti-puff piece. I've called it out every year. It helps so much to not give that like pay much mind, but take note of it so you can kind of manipulate it. But with Debo, when he comes in as fat Debo, he's usually gonna have a bad year. But I think he's on pace to come in as Debo this year. So hopefully. We got to keep tabs on him, but I totally agree. You got to bet on this guy's talent in Hunter, and this is a confirmation bias kind of league these days because you don't just sit guys. You got to take advantage of quarterbacks on rookie deals and early round picks on rookie deals. So you don't just trade half your draft as an offensive coach to go and get a guy who you're not going to play on offense. Like if anything, he's going to play everything. Like you said, he's going to be. Yep. Ohtani and just do it all. I mean, he did it in college. So, and the mental load thing, that could be huge because there has to be a massive mental burden playing a cornerback as a rookie and receiver as a rookie. And both of those things are going to be reduced to your point. So, love it. All right. Who you got next to wide receiver?
Yeah. So I'll combine these two together, but there's 2 receivers, that aren't rookies. Again, like Trey Harris and Jaden Higgins are rookies in this range I have been targeting, but it's this wide receiver 45 to 55 range I always found is like the best range to take some flyers on guys and kind of finalize your wide receiver depth. I typically don't like having too many guys beyond this range needing to fill that out. So The first is Darnell Mooney, who is going wide receiver 45 right now, and I just think it's kind of sneaky because he's not, a sexy rookie kind of guy with upside, like Harris and Higgins, obviously. But he established a very solid floor in his first season with the Falcons. He was inside the top 30 44% of the time, which ranked 35th. We just didn't see the spike weeks I thought he might have in this offense because he is, a good downfield threat. But I think with Michael Penix Jr. taking over for Kirk Cousins, that could happen this year because Penix was considered the top deep ball passer in last year's class. And we kind of saw that last year just in terms of how willing he was to throw downfield. He threw deep 14% of the time compared to Kirk Cousins just 7% of the time. And that's significant for Mooney because he was the Falcons' top downfield target. So I think if we're just going to see more downfield passes, that's going to help Mooney specifically and help unlock, more speed, ceiling spike weeks, which helps for best ball. So I like his floor ceiling combo in this range. And the next guy is at the tail end of this range. It's Rashid Shaheed going wide receiver 54. He's more of a classic best ball type target. He had a season-ending injury back in week 6 last year, but before he went down, he ranked 22nd in best ball points per game. And that's just because, he's a downfield threat. If he does catch a couple balls in a game, he could rack up yards and longer touchdowns. So he has a high ceiling, low floor combo, which is great for best ball. Now, heading into this year, we don't really know who the quarterback is going to be. It's probably going to be second round rookie Tyler Shuck. But I was looking, he was decent downfield thrower last year. He ranked 18th out of 150 qualified college passers in terms of big throw rate downfield. So I think he could be able to have a connection with Shaheed. Plus, I know you're high on Alvin Kamara, and this offense in general could be better under new head coach Kellen Moore, who I think will maximize a player like Rashid Shaheed's skill set. So I do like the situation for Shaheed this year if he stays healthy. So again, in this wide receiver 54 range, I think he's a pretty good best ball specific target where we don't really need to figure out when those spike weeks will happen. You just kind of get them automatically in best ball. So he's one of the guys that I do like to target in this range as well.
Yeah, this range has historically been very profitable, and then it kind of falls off a cliff. That's how it's been, and it makes sense. It's when you start getting past that top half of the second best receiver on each NFL team, and into that, it's just harder to predict, and it's harder to sustain for a full season. So it makes sense, and I think there's going to be some landmines in there too. I mean, you got guys like Pittman, Kupp, Ayuk, Coleman. There's a lot of guys who people might be more excited about, but you just kind of looking at what's going on around them and their situations, it's tough. I like Downs as a player, so I think he would actually be on the other end of that, but you still got to navigate the quarterback situation there. So I actually like 3 guys in this range as well, and I'll talk about them because they actually tend to go very close to each other. That's right outside the top 40. Stephon Diggs, Jaden Reed, and Matthew Golden of the Packers. So I think that combo in Green Bay, it's just buying the dip on you have a top 5 quarterback or a quarterback that was posting top 5 efficiency, even though he was hurt, and the team started going super run heavy because they could and they were still winning games. And now everyone just thinks that, or it's just, we're getting value on that entire Packer pass offense because of it. So even though Reed needed his agent to kind of say, yeah, he's our number one, he's still the number one. I mean, this guy's averaging 4.5 targets per game, doesn't play in 3 wide sets, but he's still proven that he can post numbers well above his playing time. And I think Golden helps unlock that because the main thing with Green Bay is volume. And I think that Reed And Reed benefits because Green Bay gets more volume, and Golden benefits because outside of Reed, I don't really think they like anybody in their receiving core. Like, I mean, you got Melton changing positions. Dobbs and Wicks both at different times had blowouts that didn't blow-ups that didn't represent what they actually have accomplished. I mean, which is not much of anything, but they were making a lot of noise about playing time at different points. So I just think that Golden should be the number one receiver in terms of routes run on Green Bay as soon as this year. If you really look at what they did with Wicks when everyone was healthy, Wicks was essentially Malik Heath in terms of playing time. So I think Golden's going to be there. And at this point, the market's already priced in that Reed isn't going to play in 3 wide sets. So any more pass volume for Green Bay beyond expectation, or if he does end up playing more in 2 wide sets, then it's just all gravy at that price. So I think it's a rare situation where I definitely want stacks of those guys with Love, and that's a perfect example of guys you can get late and still make it work. But Diggs, I just think people are sleeping on him, coming off an injury, keeps changing teams. But if you're Patriots, you paid this guy, you're going to use him. And Josh McDaniels, I mean, we've seen it with Devontae Adams. He's fine with drawing up plays to just kind of force feed guys. And Drake May, very good quarterback, very terrible supporting cast last year. So I think he's also the type of quarterback that if he gets a receiver like Diggs on the field, he could give him a target 30% of the time. If Diggs holds up, he holds up. It's one of those things where it's still mostly going to come down to randomness. If he's going to be definitely compromised for like a long period of time, I would change it up with Diggs, but I think the market is way too low on him, just considering he could be a monster target hog in this offense, and they paid a lot of money for him. So love those 3 guys.
Yeah, he was cleared to practice today. First of all, he avoided the PUP list heading into training camp, which is huge for his ACL recovery and being 100% by week 1. And so far so good. He avoided the PUP list, and he's cleared for practice already. So very positive news today on Diggs and just his ACL recovery and just being ready for week 1.
I mean, how much you gotta have a lot of energy to be fucking Cardi B and taking Tusi. Like, I feel like if he could do that in whatever month that was, he's probably gonna be good to go. As long as, and he's not gonna play in the preseason, so you just gotta navigate camp and not do more Tusi, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that helped his recovery. Who knows?
Yeah, it probably did. It probably did, man. Man. All right, let's hopefully we can recover from another one of these marathon pod recording sessions. Let's get out of here. But we got to do tight ends first. We got to talk to the people about who we like at tight end. Guy you already mentioned, start us off here for best ball heading into 2025. Who do you like?
Yeah, so Colston Loveland, the rookie for the Bears, they took him 10th overall. He's going around tight end 12 right now, and I'm ranking him tight end 10, and just I think he has massive upside. I was high on him heading into the draft. My comp for him was actually Jimmy Graham. He reminds me of Jimmy Graham. And, the landing spot seemed tricky with Cole Kmet already there. But I've not worried about that past month or two researching it. Not worried about that as much. I'm more excited about the fact that he's just landing in a Ben Johnson offense because Ben Johnson was instrumental in Sam Laporta's record-breaking rookie season just 2 years ago. And Colston Loveland's actually a better prospect than Sam Laporta. So his upside in this offense is just massive. And we've seen now back-to-back seasons with a rookie tight end finishing as the tight end 1 overall. So, Loveland, he does have that kind of upside. He'd probably need DJ Moore and or Cole Kmet to get hurt for that to unlock. But I love investing in his upside and also just this offense in general with Caleb Williams potentially breaking out in year 2. I think Loveland, even though he's going at tight end 12, could be offering enough upside to take there.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. I don't think he needs any injuries to anyone. I think Kmet is just Brock Wright. And DJ Moore is a guy that can put up numbers when you're scheming it to him, but like Loveland is going to win against his defensive matchup. I think more than Moore will win against his. It's just, is Ben Johnson going to continue to treat Moore the way all those other coordinators have, which he probably does, but there is some downside with DJ Moore, especially with a rookie and a year 2 guy waiting in the wings, and then another rookie at tight end. So I think that I'd much rather bet on Loveland because it's a confirmation bias league where you're drafting these guys early, even if all those other reasons to play them, like the contract, the rookie deals, and it's more of a passing league, so you don't have to do as much as a blocker. But even if you take out those reasons, it's just when you draft a guy that high, you're saying, I think he's good. And so you're going to show, I mean, look at a guy like Xavier Worthy. I mean, it really takes a lot these days for some of these rookies not to hit. And that's why I'm a lot less bullish on some of the guys to break out year 2 that didn't in year 1, because I think if you look at like the longer aging curve data, there's a lot of noise in there because the NFL is just such a different league than it is right now, where I think it's a lot more concerning if a rookie doesn't break out. And I think it's a lot more promising when players are just drafted into good spots as rookies. Like I think Colston Loveland has tight end 3 overall upside. I think it's top 3 upside, especially when you look at the shit show of the top 10 after you get past the first couple. I mean, there's some massive downside there as well. A couple guys I like. I'll just kind of name both of them here. But the first is Dallas Goedert. I just think Philadelphia is going to pass more. They just had the lowest pass volume they could have with all the game script and the Barkley long runs. So it doesn't take much to go from tight end 14 to tight end 5. And Goddard had some dominant showings last year when other guys were out for Philadelphia, which could also happen. So I think Goddard is in a good spot. We didn't know what was going to happen with him. And so he's just kind of flying under the radar. Not really exciting, but Zach Ertz wasn't exciting last year either. These guys just, they don't die, man. And I think guys like Ingram and even Hawkinson, Kelsey, like there's a lot of Andrews, a lot of floor guys there that somebody's got to occupy those spots if they do hit their floors. So like him. And then another guy is, this just kind of recently became a development, is with the Seahawks dropping Fant. I think that makes Arroyo, a rookie, a lot more interesting because he's the guy that has some juice and just the fact that they are essentially clearing space for him to play more before August, I think is a massive positive development because Cooper Kupp could not be man coverage and he couldn't be zone coverage either last year. So there is a chance that he's just a nothing burger on this team, and Arroyo is essentially as high as their number 2 most valuable fantasy threat. So I think that's the kind of sexy pick, whereas dart throw, and then Goddard is like the boring safe pick who ends up beating his ADP a lot more than I think people are giving him credit for.
Yeah, I love the Arroyo call. You're going to hate my comp for him before the draft. It was Greg Dulcich. So hopefully we get good Greg Dulcich before Sean Payton ruined him. But yeah, I love Arroyo's upside. And that Fant move means that I guess they're comfortable with him. And maybe, AJ Barner, but he might be more of a blocker. But yeah, Arroyo, his stock went way up after that move. And I think you called it, but breaking news, this happened like while we were recording, but Darren Waller was placed on the PUP list. So cash at all your bets. But I don't know what's up with that. But.
Oh, what was it? I think he was like he was going to retire or never play a snap for them. It was like just as like
right
doing No, he's still live for that.
No fans out there, so
no fans. He's low key. It's a confirmation bias league. At some point, it went from Noah Fant as what was he, a first round pick? I think he was an early round pick. From Noah Fant being like day 2 pick to Noah Fant cannot score. Like you can't be a tight end and just never score touchdowns. I mean, We would always joke about how he's just still touchdown. Listen, did he ever stop?
No, he hit one. Remember, I had him 6-1. I doubled down
Nice.
the week later. I said, I know he's going to score this week, so I'm going to do it again. And he did score. But yeah, it wasn't until like the end of the season, and I think he finished with the 1.
Yep, and now he's gone. So, and Cooper Kupp, I mean, man, he might have been the guy that deserved to be gone just as much. So I could see a disastrous situation where you just got Arroyo and JSN, and it's Milrow just kind of chucking it every which way and trying to figure it out, and it somehow works for fantasy. But we already saw it with Sam Darnold. It can still work. So yeah, love it. Who, before we get out of here, you got one more guy. I think hiring him every year, and it's been working out.
Yeah, Isaiah Likely, and he has really developed into this rare anti-fragile type tight end. Like, let's go with David Montgomery the past couple seasons.
Where
he's gonna prove it's an excellent comp. I say so myself.
But Likely's in a different part of his career, I think.
Well, yeah. He's
ascending.
He's trending up, but he has managed to carve out a role as technically the number 2 tight end to provide borderline tight end 1 value, even if Mark Andrews is healthy, which happened. Mark Andrews played all 17 games last year, didn't miss any time due to injury. There were a couple goose eggs, but that was just, he didn't get targeted. But Likely still managed to rank 16th in best ball points added per game because, just like I said, he was able to carve out a big enough role when Andrews was healthy where they were essentially splitting time in terms of routes run rate. So, he worked up to, be like the number 3 target in the offense, even when Andrews is healthy. However, if Andrews were to miss time, he would offer top 5 upside. So the fact that Likely's ADP is in that tight end 15 range means he might be able to return value even if Andrews stays healthy all 17 games again. But he has that built-in massive upside where he could become a top 5 tight end if Andrews misses time. So you don't really see that at tight end, but he has developed into that type of anti-fragile player. So I love taking him in spots in that, tight end 15 range, just given his upside. And again, he's provided a fairly high floor for being technically the backup tight end.
Yeah, because you got to kind of treat him like the number 3 receiver, because DeAndre Hopkins is just the latest Odell Beckham of Nelson Aguilar's, right?
Wow, hate to say it, but it's true.
Talk about a guy who might, he's going to make the roster, but very specific role. I just, between Hopkins and Cooper and Deontay last year, it got so exhausting watching these formerly like decent players just not have it, man. So I think Likely is kind of locked in as that number 3 receiver. And, to your point, it seemed like they were more willing than ever to take Andrews off the field or use him as a blocker. I don't know what that was about, but the fact that he's getting older probably doesn't bode well for him necessarily versus a guy like Likely who's still on the ascent. So yeah, I think Likely's one of those guys who could be a league winner, even though in a way it seems like he's overvalued to some people because he is going that high as a backup tight end, but he's not really a backup tight end. It's the same way that myself included, people undervalued Bowers a little bit if they were concerned about Michael Mayer, but Bowers was essentially a slot receiver. Like it didn't, even if Mayer was a factor, I don't think it would have really changed anything. It's just it's a completely different setup in the league these days. So yeah, Likely. All right, that is going to do it for our 2025 best ball strategy episode here on the Fantasy Flex presented by Yahoo Fantasy. We'll be back with more content next week as we get closer and closer to the regular season. So make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And of course, Don't forget to check out the all-new Fantasy Labs app if you like accurate projections, you like accurate rankings, cheat sheets customized to your league. Be sure to go and download that Fantasy Labs app right now. You can save $20 on a season-long NFL sub by downloading the Fantasy Labs app right now and purchasing the NFL subscription. You can find Sean on X at _oddsmaker. I'm at Chris Raybon. We're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Flex podcast sponsored by Yahoo Fantasy. Yahoo Fantasy is celebrating 28 years of fantasy greatness. Until next time, let's get this money.